Hi, I'm Neil Kingham. Welcome to my first ever Ask Me Anything Q&A session. In this video, we're going to cover a very diverse range of subjects, including should everyone take vitamin D supplements, side effects of Qigong, the endocrine system and yin-yang balance, what else? When acupuncture is good or not so good at treating fertility, and we're going to talk about getting stuck in a rut or kind of vicious circles in health and what Chinese medicine has to say about them, and probably some other stuff besides. So these are all questions submitted to me by people on my email list. I put out a little request a little while ago for questions, and I got tons. So thank you to everyone who sent in a question. In fact, I've got so many that there's no way I could possibly answer all of them, so I apologise in advance if you submitted a question and I don't get round to it. I'm sort of giving priority to the ones that came in soonest or quickest, and also to the ones that I think have the most broad kind of appeal to lots of people. Any that don't get answered on this one, I'm going to cover on a future session, but I'll get through as many as I can today. So first question comes from Paul, and he's asking, should everyone take a vitamin D supplement? Now, my guess is that this has come out of the advice recently. For reference, if you're watching this in the future, I'm recording this video in the midst of the coronavirus lockdown, and the UK government has recently come out and said that everyone should be taking a vitamin D supplement. And Paul's obviously wondering if this is a good idea or not. So, the thing with vitamin D is, first of all, it's a very important vitamin. You need vitamin D to absorb and use calcium. So very important for bone strength and bone health. But not only that, it seems to have a lot of other essential roles in the body. It seems to have something to immunity. It's been shown that people with low vitamin D are more prone to cancers of different kinds, and lots of other stuff. So it's really important that we have enough vitamin D. The question, of course, is, are we getting enough? What is enough, and should you supplement? So vitamin D, as I'm sure you know, is made by the body on exposure to sunlight. Problem is, here in the UK, we don't get that much sunlight, certainly outside of midsummer. And of course, even if we do, we're not out in it enough. So that's the first thing I'd say, is probably if you are, for whatever reason, outside a lot, and or if you're in a country with a lot more sunshine, then this is probably something you don't need to worry about nearly as much. I'll also mention that darker skin also absorbs less vitamin D, so that may be something to think about. It's pretty easy to get a test, and in fact you can get very easily a home test, and it's very simple. I mean, you could ask your GP for a test, but you can if you just Google something like home vitamin D test, there's a few different companies that do them. You can get them for as low as about £30, and they send it to you in the post, and you just prick your thumb and put a drop of blood onto a little kind of blotter thing and send it back to them, and then you can get the results within a few weeks normally. So that's a good place to start. It's relatively cheap and simple to get your levels measured. As for supplementing, I personally do take a vitamin D supplement, but in a kind of roundabout way. Thing with vitamin D is there's an important kind of balance between vitamin D, vitamin A, and vitamin K2. And those three form a kind of a trinity that all work together. And both vitamin A and vitamin D can be toxic. They can have negative effects if you overdose on them, basically, if you take too much. And that's largely because the ratio of the three gets out of balance. So the most effective and the safest way to take A or D supplements is in a natural food of some kind that contains all three already. And by far the best one is, and this is no good for vegetarians, so apologies in advance for vegetarians watching, it's unrefined cod liver oil. Now, I say unrefined, that's really important, because the vast majority of things labelled fish oil, or even cod liver oil, heavily refined, using heat normally or various different processes, which remove the vitamins. So cod liver oil naturally has D, A and K2, but those are all removed in the refining. So some companies will then add them back in, but then you've got sort of artificial vitamins being added and not necessarily in the right proportions. And there's also a suggestion that the processing it takes away a lot of the benefits of the cod liver oil anyway. So you're best off getting an unrefined one. And two of the best are actually fermented cod liver oils. And that actually doesn't mean cod liver oil which has been fermented. It means cod livers that have been fermented. Sounds a bit weird. And then the oil extracted from them. It's very absorbable, it's very natural. It's also pretty pricey, I have to say. But that's the type I take, and that's what I would recommend. So whether you want a good cod liver oil for general health, or whether you want a vitamin D supplement, I'd actually do it that way, rather than take one of the synthetic vitamin Ds. There's two brands which are good in the UK. The easiest one to get is Amorica, and then in the USA the big brand is Blue Ice, and they both do a fermented cod liver oil. And you don't have to have it as an oil, so you don't have to taste it. You can get it in a little, capsule filled with oil, which is probably the nicer way of doing it. So that's my thoughts on vitamin D. Now, second question comes from Jacqueline. Thanks, Jacqueline. And she says that during lockdown, she's unable to go for the walks that she's used to going for, and so she's been doing a lot of qigong at home. Now, she doesn't mention whether she'd previously been doing qigong or whether this is a new thing, but one way or another, she says that when she's doing qigong, she'll often get a feeling of heat and energy in the head, and was asking about whether there are any grounding exercises or anything like that. So this is a great question, a very specific question, but I think it's quite useful, I think, to think about the way qigong works, and kind of what it does and what this sensation might be. So there's an idea that comes more from Indian thought than Chinese about Kundalini. And the Kundalini energy kind of sits at the base of your spine, and through various breathing or meditation exercises you can raise it up to the spine, to the head. Now, in Chinese Qigong and Tai Chi thought, we rarely ever do that or an equivalent of it, because it's very much a one-way movement. The idea of and incidentally, I'm not saying Kundalini practice is bad necessarily. I don't really know enough about it to say something like that, but in any case, the Chinese view is a bit different, because it's always about circulation. So just moving up is a bit unbalanced. If you move up, you also need to move down. So the Chinese idea is, yes, you do move up, but then the energy circles round, it doesn't stay in the head, and it comes back down again. So you get a circle going on. And that's quite important. And that's one of the reasons, it's getting a bit technical now, but that's one of the reasons that in Chinese Qigong and Tai Chi, the recommendation is often when you're practicing to put the tip of your tongue on the roof of your mouth, just behind the teeth. And that's because you're connecting the two channels then. So once it comes up, there's a connection there, and it can go back down again. You get this circulation. Now, there is actually, in traditional Chinese medicine kind of thought, there are a number of different causes of disease. And, disease can be said to be caused from internal imbalances, or it could be from something external affecting you. And one of the very specific causes, sort of one of the miscellaneous causes of disease in Chinese medicine, believe it or not, is improper Qigong practice, which is kind of interesting. So, recognising that Qigong is a powerful form of exercise for moving and working with your Qi, it kind of makes sense that if Qigong works, and if it does have the ability to move and to do things with your Qi, that you could do it wrong, and that might actually cause a problem. Which is kind of interesting. Now, Jacqueline, I'm not suggesting that this sensation that you're getting is at all a problem or going to cause you any health conditions or anything like that, so please don't worry. But this idea of not sending everything up is really important. So what I like to do, and what I always recommend, is with any kind of Tai Chi or Qigong, it's good to both start and finish with something kind of grounding and settling. And there's various techniques for that, but by far the easiest and probably one of the most effective, I think, is very simply to focus on your feet, and particularly on the acupoint kidney one, the bubbling spring, which is on the sole of the feet. And I'll show you, if this is your foot and these are your toes, then it's just there. So it's in the kind of dip. You've got the balls of the feet that come here, and it's kind of in that dip there. There's a real kind of indentation, like a hollow in the foot normally. And so what you can do is, there's a good visualization. So before and after your Qigong practice, what I recommend is just spend a moment standing. Just stand still, just completely relax, probably best to close your eyes, and just focus your attention downwards and become aware of the soles of your feet. And so as you're standing on the floor or the ground, just become aware of the pressure, the feeling of the ground underneath your feet, and be aware of the feet and that sensation which we normally take for granted. And then you can just sort of sit with that sensation for a little while and feel your weight settling and sinking down into the earth. And then when you feel quite settled, imagine roots growing out from either the kidney one point or just from the soles of your feet, and sinking really deep down into the earth. And you can really picture this, and so they go down and they go out, but mainly down. And as they sink, they kind of grip hold of the earth and anchor you, and just in the way that roots anchor a plant into the ground. And you can really, go to town on picturing the exact kind of spreading out of the roots as best you're able to. And that's a really nice way of just grounding, and you can do that incidentally. That's a good exercise to do for anyone, even regardless if you're not doing any Qigong practice. Just do that on its own if you're feeling a bit up in your head and you want to kind of relax and ground a little bit. It's just quite a nice thing to do. But also, before and after your Qigong or your Tai Chi practice will just help to make sure that you're counteracting any upward surging of energy, and just brings everything down again. So you start down and you finish down. And then regardless of what kind of Qigong you're doing in the middle, that should help. Okay, so third question comes from Ashton. Thanks, Ashton. And Ashton wanted to know about yin-yang balance in the body, so how the body's yin and the body's yang work together, and how that relates to the hormonal system. Good question. And this could be an hour-long answer in itself, which it's not going to be. I'll try and kind of just summarise some thoughts around that. So, yin and yang is really the sort of fundamental, lowest level of distinction in Chinese thought, but also in Chinese medicine. So for any kind of illness or condition or imbalance or symptom, one of the basic ways of looking at it is this yin or is this yang? Or what's the balance of yin and yang that's contributing to this issue? And of course, in perfect health, we have a good level. It's never going to be perfectly level, but we have, roughly level. The more out of level they are, the more we see symptoms and illnesses and conditions. And one of the primary basic aims of any form of Chinese medicine, or you could even expand and just say any health practice or self-cultivation practice, is to balance those two levels. Now, I think that very closely relates to what your hormones are doing. So, for instance, for a woman, it's much easier to see the flow and the cycles of the hormones throughout the month. For a man, more difficult, of course. And if yin and yang are perfectly in balance for a woman, the menstrual cycle, the monthly cycle, is regular and smooth and symptom-free. And when there are issues or symptoms around that, it's often to do with too much yin or too much yang, or not enough yin or not enough yang. And one of the things I see in my clinic a lot is thyroid problems. And the standard treatment for an underactive thyroid is to give thyroxine, which is basically an artificial version of what the thyroid makes anyway. And the thyroid can go two ways. It can go overactive or underactive. And broadly speaking, that's a perfect example of yin and yang. So for someone with an underactive thyroid, that means that they will generally feel quite cold. They'll be sluggish, probably low energy, quite tired, probably quite low motivation, not much kind of get up and go, and with a tendency to put on weight. That is the perfect description, if you're going to translate that into Chinese medicine terms, of yang deficiency. If yang is everything about you that's hot and active and lively and motivated, then if you don't have enough of that, then that's when you get slow and sluggish and cold and tired and depressed. So that's yang deficiency. So in that case, underactive thyroid and yang deficiency are, I'm not going to say they're always exactly the same things. Probably for most people it's a bit more complicated, but certainly they're very similar. And the same the other way. So an overactive thyroid is basically the opposite. It's someone who's always on the go, finds it hard to switch off, has a tendency to overheat, and is normally quite thin, has struggles to put on weight, and very kind of probably stressed, tired but wired is the phrase that people often say to me in clinic. And that is the opposite. That's yin deficiency, not enough yin. So if yin is everything about you that's cool, calm and collected, then if you don't have enough of that, then you have a tendency to be anxious and irritable and kind of nervous and always on the go and all those kind of things. So we can look at yin and yang in that very simple way, and what your hormones are doing is definitely part of that. Now the reason I say it's not always so simple is because there's never a one-to-one link between any Western term or diagnosis and a Chinese diagnosis. So in other words, if you take 100 people with underactive thyroid, they're going to get 100 different treatments from Chinese medicine, whereas if you go to the doctor, all those 100 might well be prescribed thyroxine, and it will work for some people and not for others, or it works better for some than others. Whereas in Chinese medicine, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. So it's always a bit more complicated. But there's definitely a link, and I think that, to me, that seems very obvious, that link between, I'm just taking thyroid as an example, but between the hormones and yin and yang. Or another way you could look at it is maybe with the adrenals. So you can kind of see the same thing, that fight or flight, an adrenaline kind of situation is very yang. It's very active and alert, and fighting and fleeing are both very yang kind of things. And so I think that also feeds into it. So adrenaline, you could say, is very much a yang hormone, but if we're in a constant state of fight or flight, we exhaust the adrenals, we kind of wear ourselves out, essentially, for want of a better phrase, and then we flip from being constantly yang to constantly yin. It's always true that yang taken to its extreme becomes yin, and vice versa. And that, incidentally, is why there's a little dot of white in the black and a little dot of black in the white of the yin-yang symbol, because each contains the seed of its opposite. So when you get to maximum yang, after years and years of stress and fight or flight, you crash, and everything becomes yin, and suddenly you've got no energy and you're just floored. And so you could call that adrenal exhaustion. That's going from maximum yang suddenly to maximum yin. So it was a bit of a complicated answer, maybe, but as I say, it could have been more complicated than that. Hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea or kind of an insight into how that works. Now, time for a quick aside, I think, before I go on to the next couple of questions. I mentioned this was the first in what will be a series of these Ask Me Anything recordings, and So the idea is to do once a month, and I'm going to invite questions every month. And this one's going out for free, so you can kind of get a bit of a feel for what's involved and what it's going to be like. Future Ask Me Anythings, and along with a whole host of other self-cultivation videos and audios, will be going out in my Inner Circle membership area. So, if you're interested, if this kind of thing interests you, and if you would like to also learn about the Chinese approach to nutrition and herbs and self-acupressure and a whole host of other things that you can do for yourself at home to boost your health, strengthen your energy, and bring yourself into balance, then the Inner Circle is the place to be. And you can check that out at neilkingham.com/innercircle, and I'll put the link to that below this video on YouTube. So feel free to go and have a look. And so if you want future videos along these lines, then that's the place to go. Okay, so on with questions. Andrew asks about acupuncture and fertility. This is another really good question, I think. These days, acupuncture is quite well known for helping with problems of fertility, and rightly so, because it can be very effective. And mainly, I would say, in two quite different ways. So the first one is probably the most well known. So for a couple who know that they have an issue and are going through the IVF process, or not necessarily IVF, it could be ICSI, but some kind of assisted reproductive technique, then acupuncture alongside that is super effective. Depending on what research you read, it looks like it increases the chances of the IVF working by between 40 to 60%, which is enormous. Given that IVF, one round of IVF, if you're paying for it, is really expensive. And so to pay the extra little bit for a course of acupuncture alongside, if it's going to increase the chances that much, I mean, to me it's a no-brainer, to be honest. So that's something that's done quite a lot now. It's something I've done countless times in clinic. But that's kind of an unusual use of acupuncture, really, because you're not saying, I have a condition or an issue and I'd like acupuncture to help it. Really what you're saying is, I've got an issue and I want IVF to help it, and I want acupuncture to support the IVF, which is kind of interesting. It's a different way of looking. But it's really effective. It makes the IVF more effective, but also just helps you to get through it, because it can be a bit of a grueling process, both physically and, of course, mentally and emotionally. And so acupuncture is very good for reducing stress and dealing with the side effects of the medication, if there are any. Not everyone has any, but if there are. But then the other time that acupuncture can be useful is when there's no IVF happening, and a couple are trying to conceive naturally, but for whatever reason it's not working. And what Andrew has asked, which is I think is really interesting, is when is that more likely to work and when is it not? And so what I'd say is, I like it when someone or a couple or an individual come into my clinic and they've been trying to conceive, hasn't happened, and they've been and had the kind of standard tests, and nothing's come back. So, or nothing's come back negative, I should say. So they're just kind of thinking, well, apparently everything's okay, but yet still nothing's happening. Now that to me is the dream situation, and in that case, acupuncture can work amazingly well. And I've had a couple of examples of just a couple have been trying for a year or a couple of years, and then literally just a few sessions of acupuncture, and they fall pregnant. It's fantastic. I'm not going to say it always works quite that well, because it doesn't. And the sort of explanation for that is that the tests come back fine because there isn't a recognisable physical problem. So, you look at the sperm, they're fine. Look at the eggs, they're fine. Ovulation seems to be regular. Everything's fine, And yet it's not happening. And so the Chinese medicine approach would be that the reason it's not happening is because there's no physical problem necessarily, there's an energetic problem. So the energy, the chi of the parents, and probably especially the mother, or mother-to-be, is out of balance in some way. There's some blockage, and so that's why it's not happening. And what acupuncture does amazingly well, the way it works really, is it clears blockages and it balances and regulates. So in that kind of situation, really, really good. At the other end, there's something, I mean, acupuncture is amazing and I love it, but of course it's not a magic wand. There's some things it can't cure. And one of the things is, if there is a very kind of obvious reason why conception's not happening naturally, then sometimes that's not curable. So for instance, if there's a physical, what's the word I'm looking for? If something's kind of deformed for whatever reason. So let's say the fallopian tubes are kind of twisted and blocked and that could be congenital, it could be because of some illness or an accident or who knows. Then of course something like that, there's only so much acupuncture you can do, and in that case nothing really. Needless to say, if a woman is not ovulating at all, and again that could be some genetic thing, or it could be a very early menopause. In fact, I had an email just the other day from quite a young woman who had gone through menopause much earlier than expected. I can't remember how old she was, but I think she just turned 40 or something like that, so it was pretty young. And she was saying, that she would like to conceive, to have a child, and could acupuncture do anything? And in that case, reluctantly, I had to say, do you know what? It can't, because if you've got no eggs left, if you've been through menopause already, there's no turning back the time, unfortunately. So I hate to say I can't help, but of course sometimes that's the case. So I think those are the issues where it's those kind of things. And the other one actually I'd mention is, we're talking about the woman, but acupuncture I think can help with issues with sperm quality or quantity, but only ever so slightly in my experience. Herbs are much better. So I still think Chinese medicine has a lot to offer, but then for the man, if it's a sperm count or a motility issue or something like that, then I would go down the Chinese herbal medicine route. Much more effective in that case than acupuncture, generally. I have seen acupuncture help a little bit, but if that's the main problem, then I would be looking at herbs instead. Okay, I think we've got time for one more question, and this one comes from Simon. And so actually this one was a follow-on question from... so Simon came to me for a consultation and sent this email as kind of a follow-on, but I thought it would be an interesting point to discuss. So Simon asked, why does it take the body a lot of time to get into a virtuous circle from a vicious circle? Now, I better explain this a bit. This is to do with getting stuck in a rut, health-wise. And Chinese medicine has a really good way of looking at this and explaining it and understanding it. I think we've all had the experience where you get some problem, symptom, issue, whatever, and it just seems to get stuck, and you can't get rid of it, and you try various different things, and they don't seem to work. And one of the explanations from that, from a Chinese point of view, is that you kind of get in this vicious circle. And it's to do with the interrelation of the different organs and various other factors. And so the way I prefer to explain it, that I think is easiest to understand, is each organ in Chinese medicine has an associated emotion. So let's have an example. So the liver, the emotion associated with liver is anger. So and anger is quite a broad term, so that would include just kind of irritability and snappiness and those sorts of things, short temper. But the important thing is that relationship works both ways. So in other words, if your liver energy, your liver chi, is weak or imbalanced, that will make you more prone to anger. On the other hand, if you experience a lot of anger, that will cause a weakness or an imbalance to your liver qi. And so you get in a vicious circle. You get angry, it damages the liver, and then the out of balance liver makes you more angry, and then because you're angry, it affects the liver, and that makes you more angry, and so it goes round and round. And so you get a vicious circle. And so another example would be the spleen, by which we always mean digestive system in Chinese medicine. It's a bit of a translation issue. The emotion for the digestive system is worry, or sometimes it's called pensiveness or overthinking, which a lot of people have, right? So you worry, you overthink, and that weakens your spleen. And then because you've got a weak spleen, you're more predisposed to worrying and overthinking. And so same thing, you get this vicious circle. And it's like a feedback effect. So over time, it can actually become worse and worse and worse, because you get more and more worrying, more and more weakened spleen, and so on. And so the question is, how do you break into that? The good news is you can break into it from either directions. Let's take this worry and digestion. It means if you improve your digestion by any means, that will make you less inclined to worry. And when I say by any means, that could be a treatment. It could be you get some acupuncture or take some herbs, or it could be that you just improve your diet or something simple like that. And so your digestion strengthens, and then you're a little bit less inclined to worry. And then because you worry a little bit less, it stops affecting your digestion so much. And so then you turn the vicious circle into a virtuous circle. Or of course the other way to do it, so you can do it from either side. So you can either start with the organ, or you can start with the emotion. So with this vicious circle of digestion and worry, you could work with the digestion by treating to strengthen your stomach and your digestive system with acupuncture or herbs or diet or whatever. Or you could find a practice or something, a way of life or whatever, some intervention that will help you to worry less. And God knows, that could be anything. That could be something formal like meditation. It could be, I don't know, going for a walk in the woods, or a journaling practice every evening, or, I don't know, counselling. It could be a million different things. But anything that you find that helps you to worry less will actually improve then your digestive system. And same with the liver and anger and all the various other organs. So I think Chinese medicine explains quite well how you can get into this vicious circle, and actually also explains how you can get out of it as well. But over time, the vicious circle is going to kind of, you're going to get stuck in a rut. It's going to kind of get ground in almost. And so then, once it's built up momentum, to break into that and slow it down and then turn it back the other way, it's not necessarily easy. And so actually, when that vicious circle is quite ingrained, the best thing to do is not start one end or the other, but start both ends together and do as much as you can, and then that way you can turn it around much more quickly. So that was a very specific, it was quite a technical question. So we started on a very broad one about vitamin D, and we finished on something super technical in Chinese medicine. And that's what I like. I'd like to continue this series with a whole range of questions. And so please feel free to ask me any kind of question you like, as long as it's something to do with health, well-being, self-cultivation, natural medicine, Chinese medicine, those kinds of things. That's my ballpark. Random trivia, not so much. Or also feel free to ask me about me, about things that I do, or if there's any questions along those lines that you want to know, that's also fine. So, thank you so much for the questions. Again, apologies if I didn't get to yours. I will get round to them in future. Thanks so much for watching. As I said, if you want more like this and lots of other related stuff, and loads of helpful things that you can do for your own self-cultivation, your own health and well-being, right now, in your very own home, then the Inner Circle is the place to be. All the future videos are going up on the Inner Circle page of my website, and that's the only place you're going to be able to get them. So do check it out, neilking.com/inner circle. All the details are there. It's very simple and straightforward, I think. So hopefully I will see you there. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.